Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Executive Director, Mrs. Sharon Ridley, the Deputy Executive Director, Mrs. Kimberly Osborne, and the Strategic Outreach and Communications Director, Mrs. Chanel Bankston Carter, thank you for attending training today. The Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization will continue to leverage the efficiency of technology to provide timely and relevant information to small businesses. The department recognizes small businesses bring to the table the advantages of flexibility, generally lean staffing, and invigorating entrepreneurial spirit. As a vital aspect of our supply chain, small businesses help us serve our nation's veterans with honor by using the qualities I mentioned earlier. Thank you for attending today and best wishes with your future business pursuits. My name is Curtis Brandon, and joining me today is Dr. Linda Williams and my colleague, Wendy Bray. This training is being recorded. The recording, as well as today's presentation, will be sent out to you within 72 hours, along with the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube page. So if you look at this front page right here, you can find our YouTube link, our QR code right here. If you want to scan it. You can find our other training and other videos that we have completed this year to assist you with becoming procurement ready. Please note that the Q&A box on your panel. Add all of your questions in the Q&A box and not the chat. I ask that you do that so we can filter and answer all of your questions. You will be able to respond and talk to others that are on this platform through the chat. So please make sure if you respond and have a question for the actual training, send that to the Q&A panel that's on the side of your computer or your phone. At the end of this training, a survey window will appear. We will ask that you please take the time to complete it. Your responses will be used as a part of our continuous service improvement efforts. And I want to say to all of the veterans that are in attendance, thank you for your service. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Linda Williams from our acquisition and support team to take us further into this presentation. Dr. Williams. I think you're on mute, Dr. Williams. I just took you off.
Sorry about that. I'm talking away.
It's okay.
Thanks everyone for being here today. And hopefully you'll get some information that will help you when you're looking at the clauses within your specific contract vehicles. We will begin with understanding what the FAR actually is. There's a question for Wendy. All right, what we'll discuss today is what is the Federal Acquisition Regulation, acronym FAR. We will talk about COVID acquisition related information and how it relates to the FAR, how to use it, the supplements to it, the importance of usage of the FAR and supplements together for contractors, summary, and then finally the questions and answers. The Federal Acquisition Regulations, FAR, is the primary regulation used by all federal executive agencies in their acquisition of supplies and services with appropriated funds. The FAR was established to codify uniform policies for acquisition of supplies and services by federal executive agencies. We are currently using the 8/10/2022 version. And in your PowerPoint slides that you'll receive, it provides you the link. The FAR consists of 53 parts. It is routinely updated to implement new laws and executive orders. Updates are called Federal Acquisition Circulars. And you can also get those sent to you individually if you go to the website and sign up for them so that you can keep up with any changes to the FAR. You can also download HTML format, PDF format, the Federal Acquisition Circulars, and supplemental regulations. Agency changes are published in the Federal Register, and we have also provided you that link so that you can get your notifications through them as well to your email. COVID acquisition related information and resources are also on the FAR website. You have to go to the right side of the link and you will see any information and resources there. But I've also provided a direct link to that information because there are also summaries and changes to those type of acquisitions as well. You will also find other essential links, such as summary data by agency and detailed information on contracts awarded in support of COVID-19, and they can be found in a standard FPDS report, and they're posted twice per week. So let's get into what is the FAR. A lot of folks get a little confused when it comes to clauses and how they apply to usage of the FAR. You don't need to read the entire FAR. It's quite large and a lot of areas you'll never work in or apply for contracts in. You read the sections that apply to you as outlined in that particular solicitation and contract that you are receiving, and or those clauses that may be annotated in requests for information if they provide them. Use the table of contents or an online search feature, which is inside of the FAR, to locate what you're looking for. Any FAR parts that say they are reserved are done so when the regulations change and that portion of the FAR is no longer applicable. Understand what you are agreeing to and committing to when you sign a federal government contract. FAR clauses are non-negotiable. However, you can become better prepared for negotiations with the federal government. And I've also included a link for you to go to under subpart 52.2. You need to understand your responsibilities when responding to a solicitation and how to look up those parts of the FAR that apply to your particular solicitation. It is a cross-reference. So part 52 will show you the clauses long form so that you can read them. All of them are going to begin with the 52 series unless they're specific agency series, and those are going to be added in, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But the 52.2 is going to always be there. But for instance, if it's 52.219-6, which is in this case a notice of total small business set aside. The first part provides which FAR part is being used, so that 19 is FAR part 19. The -6 refers to the part of FAR part 19 that you need to look up. So it makes it simple to look at that clause and then go to the part of the FAR that you need to associate with that particular procurement. Provisions and clauses can be in full text or reference. Reference provisions or clauses have the same impact as full text ones. So when you look in your solicitation and you see that it says reference, it's best to go read what that clause states. Can you hear me a little bit better now,
Yeah, I
Brandon?
was gonna say,
Okay,
yes, we can hear you better. Yeah, thank you.
okay. Each provision or clause provides where in the FAR it is prescribed to use the provision or clause. The FAR states when the contracting officer shall use each provision or clause. So in FAR Part 52, it will show you, and they still have discretion, the CO does, if they're to put the full text or if they're just to reference it. So you'll have a reference list which applies to that contract, and then you'll have some clauses that are they automatically just put the full context in it. Either one are, it's just as important as the other. The electronic version of the FAR contains hyperlinks to go to between the provision and the clause and when to use it. Another example is if you had 52.214-22, evaluation of bids for multiple awards, as prescribed in 14.201-6Q. It tells them to insert a particular clause, and this is for evaluation of bids of multiple contract awards. The date of that clause is always in parentheses, and at the end of that clause, it will say end of provision, or it may say end of reference. And that's what you have to pay attention to see if you need to go back and read the full context. Agency acquisition regulations implement or supplement the FAR. So if you're currently in business, each agency, as far as the DoD, they have the DFAR, which is a supplement. It doesn't change the FAR. It adds their agency-specific requirements attached to those specific sections of the FAR. Like GSA has their own GSAM. So for instance, their clause for FAR Part 19 and the Small Business Act will be 555. For us, it's 852. For the Department of Defense, it's 252 is their supplemental guide directory. So that will help you also understand that each supplement is by agency and that it's important to look at those supplements if you're bidding on something for DOD, for GSA, for any, EPA, any of those agencies, they all have supplements. Agency regulations follow the structure and numbering system of the original FAR when they supplement it. And I've given you some examples in the PowerPoint exercise presentation so that you can understand how it relates. Agency regulations add additional parts when adding information not found in the FAR. And an instance to that would be anything that's specific to how we do procurements in the VA concerning Vets First. That is not a part of the FAR. For DOD is how to buy armory type weapons, systems, and so forth. Their specifics will be in their supplement. The FAR and the supplements are all important to the contractor, with the most important being how to use it and how to find the specific part of the solicitation and association you are looking at. Now, for small businesses, VA procurements or not, FAR Part 19 is most important to you. For us, it's VAR. Part 819 in association and complements FAR Part 19. The VAR being specifics to vets first, and the FAR being specific to small business programs. The importance of usage by contractors. The federal supply schedule holders, GSA or VA, you should review and understand the federal supply schedules located in FAR Part 8.4. Then you associate that with your federal supply schedule supplement. In our case, 38 USC 8127D, the Rule of Two requires the VA to set aside procurements for veteran-owned small businesses or service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. When market research indicates that there are two or more such entities that would submit office offerers, assuming an award can be made at a fair, reasonable price. Now, this is addressed in the VAR. Okay. So that is the supplement. The VA also contains a provision that governs certain procurements made by other agencies on behalf of the VA, thus requiring specific VAR additional clauses. So although you may have a GSA contract, when we buy from GSA, we have our own specific clauses that we also add to their original clauses per signature of that GSA contract. So those additional clauses under the VAR are strictly applied to us. If after December 31st of 2008, the Secretary enters into a contract, memorandum of understanding, agreement, or other arrangement with any governmental entity to acquire goods or services, the Secretary shall include in such contract, memorandum, agreement, or other arrangement a requirement that the entity will comply to the maximum extent feasible with the provisions of this section in acquiring such goods or services. And that means that they use the supplemental clauses and agreement to do so when they're doing outside agency procurements, or have other agencies do procurements for them.
Oh, Dr. Williams, before you continue, and remember that anybody have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A so I can ask Dr. Williams as we go through the presentation. And I did see some that's coming in now. You know, man, stopping to ask a few questions, Dr. Williams. Are you ready for
Okay,
that?
no, that's fine.
Okay. What happens when only one SDVOSB bid? My company is a SDVOSB, Heavy Construction Corporation, that has a niche in cemetery construction.
Well, that's a partial question because, and the reason why I say that, it depends on market research. If there's another heavy construction company out there that you may not know about, even though it's industry specific, you may think knowledge as far as industry specific. We may find one that's another SDVOSB, for instance, and it depends on your dollar threshold. It depends on the dollar threshold if it can be a sole source award. So our decision is based on market research itself. Is
Thank
there
you.
another question?
Thank you. Yes. So this means when USACE is procuring design or construction management for the VA, they need to follow the rule of two, right? If market research shows there are two or more VOSBs or SDVOSBs.
USACE. No. The statute is specific to the VA. Other agencies do not have to abide by vets first. It's specific to us. Okay. They have goals that they have to meet, and therefore they do set aside, but there's nothing that tells them that they have to, other than the guise of FAR Part 19, as far as small business set asides by socioeconomic category. But it's not that they're not associated when it comes to set asides. We have vets first, and we're the only agency that's required to follow that guidance, that statute.
Thank you. And the follow-up for your last question, he said cemeteries are generally $1 to $5 million. To
Okay,
the last
so
question you just finished answering, the one
so
before that.
so based on the market research, if it's under 750,000, they can do a sole source award, and but that's based on their market research. As I stated earlier, if you're the only one in that business and that is what they find, then they may come to you directly.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Williams. How is market research conducted? And RFI? That's a question.
Okay, so we don't venture too far off
Right.
bar here. That's a whole nother class. But briefly, market research is done in a series of ways. It's done continuously by the program office, via journals, via industry standards, things that they attend. We do RFIs. Um, we do an abundance of things. Industry days. There, it depends on the procurement itself. Okay.
Yes, thank you. And one more before you continue. Um, there's a new push by SBA to get a subcontractor past performance for small business recognized. So small businesses can be competitive for prime contracts. FAR 15.305 says that the agency should consider the past performance of certain subcontractors. Who must the past performance assessment be from to be considered for small business subcontractors? The prime, the government, any recommendation on how to obtain these assessments?
Well, of course, the government would not know who the subcontractors are because they may be 2 or 3 levels extended. So that information and agreement that you do with that uh, prime, they should be entering that information in uh, CPARs, that they are using you, rating you, and so forth. If they're not doing that, then it's up to you to indicate what projects you worked on and what you did within those projects, because not all primes follow the rule of thumb to rate their subcontractors appropriately. ESRS is your subcontractor module database for rating for the primes to rate you.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Dr. Williams. You can, we don't have any more right there. We do have some, but we'll answer these later. So until you continue, you finish your presentation.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've provided a slide as well. When you get this, you'll be able to take a look at some of the recommendations which parts you should pay attention to. And FAR Part 2 incorporates the definitions of particular words and language that's used throughout the FAR. Of course, your FAR Part 19 small business programs, uh, Part 22 labor laws, Part 28 bonds and insurance for those of you that are in the construction field. Um, and you also have an area in here for commercial services. Part 29, which is your taxes. Part 33 is protests. Part 36, construction and architect engineer contracts. Part 44, subcontracting policies and procedures, which relates to the question that was just asked. And Part 49 is terminations. Important usage of the FAR. When you fill in the blanks of some clauses and provisions, they will have a requirement to do so. So you have to look at the clauses to see if it's language that requires you to answer or if it requires the CO to fill it in. And that's important in certain contract vehicles because it may make the difference in you knowing what you can and cannot do. For instance, if it requires you to have, we'll look at another clause where you do have to fill in to have buildings. Is it okay to have those buildings located in a vicinity of that hospital? Is it okay to have them outside the state? So some of the fill-ins, you need to make sure that if it's the CO's um, checkbox or a numerical application, that they do that. If it's yours, that you respond to it. An example is 52-215-6, place of performance. The offerer or respondent in the performance of any contract resulting from this solicitation, it asks you if you intend or does not intend to use one or more plants or facilities located at a different address from the address of the offerer or respondent, as indicated in this proposal. So you have to click these two. You have to check one of the two. Now, alternates, okay? There are clauses that are alternate and those that are primary. And the CO has the option of picking one or the other pertaining on its content if they're going to use it in a solicitation. So you will also see that printed in the clauses, and you will then know how to associate that with the VAR, if it's under the VAR, or the FAR clause. Now, there's quite a few provisions and clauses in the FAR. There's over 580. So knowing all of them, you never will. But understanding those that are specific to your industry um, would help you when you're going through anything else that may be added to support that particular contract so that you can focus in on it. Contracting officers select which ones are applicable to that type of contract they are writing. And that's what makes the difference as well. So if you have a firm fixed price or a firm fixed price cost, labor hours, all of these other things. So there's additional clauses that's required. If it's a partial set aside, there's an additional clause. If it's a clause to give credit for SDVOSB participation, subcontracting participation, there's another clause. So those are things that you would need to pay attention to. And as I stated earlier, in our case at the VA, the VAR clauses are added for agency-specific solicitations. So that's where you're going to see the 8 series um, located above or beyond the clauses that you are looking at in your solicitation. Which ones they select can impact your contract and the cost to you to provide those supplies and services under the contract. So it's really important to take a look at those. Amendment. Change made to solicitation before contract award. The things that you have to pay attention to within those clauses, modifications, written change to the terms of a contract, the use of the word shall and must indicate our obligation to act, Most solicitations indicate contractor shall. Should indicates an expected course of action to be followed unless inappropriate for a particular circumstance. Will indicates an anticipated future action or result. May indicates a discretionary action. Most solicitations indicate government may. And in your reference definition area in the FAR, you can review those parts of words that are used throughout clauses and how they apply to you. It is important to understand the FAR and its contents, how it applies to your solicitation, to fill in the clauses when it's appropriate, or look for fill-ins when it's supposed to be the CO doing so. Supplements and reference numbers, small business programs, FAR Part 19, understanding how that applies to that individual agency supplement, subcontracting clauses for set-asides, understanding application and legal application of missing clauses as determined by what's called the Christian doctrine. And I will briefly, since we're a little bit early and finishing, the Christian doctrine is a little bit extensive in understanding. It has to do with the failure to put a clause in a solicitation. And it's not a one answer type situation. There are things that are what you will hear you should have known. Most people refer to that like the government would have the right to terminate a contract, but because the termination clause wasn't in there, they can't terminate. So there's a case law on that and so forth. So this is a pretty big area, and I would advise you when you have time to look up some of the case law on pertaining to this and some of the previous cases that have been decided for contract law. What we reviewed today is what is the Federal Acquisition Regulation, COVID acquisition related info, how to use the FAR, what supplements are, and the importance of using the FAR and supplements for contractors together. Now, what do you have any questions that I have not answered yet, Curtis?
Yeah, I do. Um, One question came in, said, as a SDVOSB, we are being limited due to revenue paid to subcontractors. Why has this changed? And if there are zero SDVOSB companies in the market, can this be expected by the CO?
Okay, I did not get the first part of that. Can you slow that down?
Yeah,
I want to hear the
abs-
complete.
yeah, absolutely. As a SDVOSB, we are being limited due to revenue paid to subcontractors. Why has this changed? And if there are zero SDVOSB companies in the market, can this be expected by the CO?
Okay, I'm going to try to, it seems like that's two questions. And the first question is that you're limited by the payments or the amount that's paid to you by subcontractors that are primes. Is that correct? That just put yes or no in the window. Did the person answer that question? I want to make sure I understand them, what
They
they're
said
asking.
they said no, we are the prime.
Okay, and they're limited in what way?
Hold on one second. Pass through revenue limitations to the sub.
Okay, so I'm assuming what you're talking about is similarly situated companies. Um, and in that determination, with construction being different, the calculation of what you have to pay the government has been changed, and that's of government dollars. That is something that you have to look at and understand how to apply it. Um, it's government dollars, and I'll give you a brief instance of how that applies to you as a prime. If it is a service code and you're providing services, and for instance, out of that contract, 30 or 40% of it in dollars goes towards supplies. That part, that supplies, if it was a service NICS code used, is removed from the part of the 50% that you can't pay out to other sized entities in dollars. So I do have some examples that I can send to you so that you'll understand how to calculate that. Because if it's a supply contract, um, you have to take the parts that's applied to services in dollars that you pay for service out of your total amount. So it's a calculation, and I don't think people have went to the new SBA rule to understand how to apply that. That reduces quite a bit of the revenue that can be shared outside of the VOSB or small categories. Did that answer the question?
Yes, she stated, we are the prime with a 721 accommodations being the service by hotels. So that was a response to the question that she was just asking.
Okay. Okay. So if you're a hotel and it's a service contract, any supplies that's associated with that contract, if they use the service code, NICS code, can be taken out that total amount, and then you look at how many dollars is given based under that 51%. Okay. But if you send a separate note, then I will send you a calculation type how you figure that up, because that reduces the amount that on either side that you have to look at when considering what you can pay out outside of your size standard. Okay.
Okay, thank you. How do you determine the highest pay as the prime?
How do you determine what?
The highest pay as the prime?
How do you determine the highest pay as the prime? I'm a little confused by that question.
Okay. Can you please elaborate on your question, please? All right, I'll go to the next one. If I am managing, if I am a managing partner in a joint venture AA company, can I use the JV to bid on SDVOSB opportunities? I am an SDVOSB company.
Okay, the JVs are handled by the SBA. So any intricate details or information needs to be handled by them. Um, because it gets a little sticky and they look at what you're doing, what you have done, and also applying the rule of two. So that's something that you need to address with the person that signed off on your JV.
Got it. Thank you. And to the follow up to the previous question, it stated managing partner as the prime on an awarded contract.
Okay, but that's a statement. What is the question? I'm still a little confused. Are they you able to um let them speak?
Hold on, Dr. Williams. Pull them up. One second.
Outstanding.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir. How are you today?
Hi, I'm well. How you doing? Go ahead and you free to answer your question.
Thank you. I'd like to
Welcome.
say first and foremost, I appreciate the invitation to this session. It isn't something that I didn't think anybody paid attention to, and it was questions I always had about the FAR. But one thing that keeps coming up the most in other webinars with PTAC and so forth is this thing about if I'm the primary, so say for instance, I'm partnered with a reference laboratory like Upjohn Pharmaceuticals or Charles River Pharmaceuticals, and together we are providing a service based on a request of a contract or the statement of work within the contract, and we are awarded that contract. How do I determine to be the highest payer? Because that thing keeps coming up where I have to be able to say that I'm the highest payer amongst all of us that are being paid, the companies that I partner with. How do I determine how to be the highest payer? In other words, what is there a formula to use to indicate or show what I'm compensated for as a managing partner or in a business development issue where I have partnered with a reference lab because I don't have the resources myself as the small business, but I have.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is where I was just talking about. That is your supply and service code.
Okay.
Okay. And that's where you need to understand your subcontracting commitments based on either. All right. And that came out last year as far as how to calculate that.
Okay.
That is one reason why you need to always go to the SBA and have those changes sent to you, especially under FAR Part 19.
Okay.
What I will do is if you can get his name, Curtis, so that I can send him an example calculation on how to do that.
Outstanding.
Okay. And that's only if it's set aside.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Only if it's set aside, not unrestricted or anything else, just set aside.
That's set aside.
Okay. Outstanding.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Williams, I think we have, I'm looking one more so far that I can see, and it says quick follow-up, please. So Vets First does not follow the money, even though Congress appropriated the money for the VA. And I think that was a response to your earlier question that you answered about the VA Vets First program.
Yes, it does. They do follow the money. So in essence, if you get awarded a set aside contract and the CO asks you to show them how you are meeting your 51%, then you need to be able to do that. And a good instance is, like I said, if it's a service contract, and in order to do that service, you have to buy, $10,000 worth of supplies or $100,000 worth of supplies and be able to perform it, then that $100,000 comes out of that total amount, which you would then look at for your being able to tell them what part of that work you're doing. So instead of it being, say, a $300,000 contract, technically, that you would have to do the 51%, and it's now a $200,000 contract. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Next question. We are in the transportation industry and are constantly manning SAMs for contracts to move government freight equipment. Rarely, if any, are there contracts available there. However, transportation brokers are constantly presenting freight for DoD. What are we missing, or why is it that we have no access to potentially procure those contracts?
Okay, so that's a procurement question, but we got time and I'm going to answer it. Transportation brokers are inherently governmental positions, okay? We're not DOD, but we do have a transportation office. So any of those duties, when it comes to brokers, it can get a little bit sticky. So what we do is we do have a transportation division where we work with DOD, okay, to move air freight, to move freight by land. So a lot of the things that you may be seeing are for the VA. Now, I posted a request for information, I want to say about 3 months ago, to understand who was out there in the community that did small moves. I did get some brokers. They were limited by areas, which were fine, because what we did not want to do was to provide um, DOD with access to all of our transportation needs. So with that RFI, we were able to identify who could move goods where and in what form. Are they carriers? Are they, you know, and I'll send you that information as well so you can take a look at it. But there are opportunities. It just depends on which NICS code that you use. That particular request for information, I think I used almost 15 or 20 NICS codes that had movement of goods locally, brokers, air, land, sea, all of that to find out who was in the marketplace. Okay. So
Okay.
we do use them. It's just the words that you may be using, or the NICS code that you may be looking for. So I'll send you that solicitation, and that will give you a good idea of what the department is looking for by NICS codes.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. When we send a presentation out, will you be able to, can we send the calculation with the presentation? I have a lot of people asking for it.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just I'll put it on a PowerPoint slide and add it to this,
Okay.
and it'll give an example. You know, it's just two examples, and you can go to the SBA. It gets more. The electronic code of federal regulations should be a tab that everyone has, and on their in their search engines, because that's where it all begins, and that's where it gets explicit when it defines programs, where it defines laws. And you can go into that particular tab and get a little bit more in depth on what the SBA, what they have defined, okay? Because that is a SBA policy. So I'll put it on there and give you two examples, okay?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Williams. A few more questions before we close out. Um, might this might be a little bit outside of the FAR regarding teaming agreements between us and the sub. Do you have any specific or good, um, hold on, Dr. Williams, some block my view, to know if tips or tricks, do we need a teaming agreement with our supplier?
Nope, that's an attorney-client type thing. I could not and would not make recommendations on that. That's something that you need to go to your attorney and look at that agreement and make sure it's legally sound.
Thank you. This was a follow-up to a question earlier. It says in follow-up, why is the VA the only one that follows this 51% rule?
Because the VA is the only one that has to follow vets first.
Okay.
We don't have any control over any other agency. 109461 is ours, and it's specifically for the VA. And so Congress made stipulations on how we can apply it.
Okay. Thank you. Just a few more. My company works in telecommunications, and I'm restricted on deals that I can work on because of the clause on subcontracting. Being a small business, I cannot afford to install a multi-billion-dollar network. Can I use the project management and support of the contract to qualify for the 51%?
Telecommunications is totally different. And that's a whole nother part of the FAR. And usually 99% of the time, when it comes to telecommunications, it's going through GSA because they're responsible for telecommunication type contracts. Now, unless you're doing cabling and those type of things, you know, that requires another part of the FAR. So I have to be a little bit more specific to your situation in order to help you understand what part of the 51% you have to do. And most of those are not set aside. Have you experienced set aside solicitations that you've responded to? I'm asking the individual that presented that question.
Okay. I'll wait for them to respond until we get to the response. Somebody wanted me to inform the participants that your local PTAC can assist you with, your procurement needs and help you with becoming procurement ready as well. So please visit your local PTAC and ask for assistance if needed. Next question was, is that solicitation you was referring to for the Atlanta VA particularly office or the Atlanta office in VA? The VA office in Atlanta, sorry.
Okay, so I would have to see it, and he can supply that to us, or send it to us email. You have your email there. Use the AST email, and it will get to me, and then I can answer that question. I have to look at the solicitation and what they're asking for, and
Okay.
how they solicited for it. Okay.
Yes, thank you. How can I get on Best 2? I am currently on GSA and GWAC.
I can't answer that because I'm not GSA.
Okay,
Usually on their website, they have the information on how to get on those particular vehicles that they award.
got it. All right. So FAR 52 222-46 requires realism on evaluations. How can we influence the contracting officers to apply this in order for small businesses to be forced to not compete or make bids that cannot be executed as required?
Okay, so there's something that's left out of that. Cost realism is totally different, and it has a additional clause that is supposed to be associated with it. If we don't come in and check your books, or you're not required to submit those to us, cost realism is done in this way: by industry with a specific increase each year. Okay. So if your industry, based on contract awards and market research that were done in a specific time frame, there's a tool that we use under GSA, which is the higher end, because those contracts are based on worldwide services. We look at, those individual things market wise. There's there should not be anything priced that was priced 10 years ago and expect someone to supply it at that same price unless it hasn't changed. However, we do the market research. So cost realism is something that we do anyway. We have to develop a independent government estimate. Are we going to pay 40 and 50% more? Probably not. Because that's still your money as a taxpayer, and we are a steward of taxpayer money. Reasonable, $50, $100, or whatever, but that's based on the market rate. So those are things that are considered.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I got 3 more for you. The example earlier showed a key question regarding the location of manufacturing and our requirement to check a box regarding the location. As a reseller, we deal with large companies where this information is not always readily available. We may know that it is TAA complaint, but not the specific location. Sometimes there are 3 or 4 complaint factories. How do we deal with the questions that are really directed at the manufacturer? That was his first question.
It's only if it's included. If that clause is not included, you don't have to answer it. If it is, then you deal with the CO and ask them that specific question if they're requiring that information. Because it could be that they can't buy from a plant in Shanghai or off in some island somewhere that's not compliant. So when they ask that question and you need some clarity, then you write the CO and ask them. Or if you're doing an RFI, you can add that question so that they can clarify it before before it goes out to bid.
Got it. And his second question was, there are often sections that do not need to be completed if our SAM registration is up to date. However, the formatting in contracts often makes it hard to follow where each section ends. Is there a way to see this more clearly broken out on an example that we can view?
Okay, so this is another one I'm not clear on. Read that a little bit slowly.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. There are often sections that do not need to be completed if our SAM registration is up to date. However, the formatting in contracts often makes it hard to follow where each section ends. Is there a way to see this more clearly broken out or an example that we can view?
Okay, if this has to do with SAM registration in totality, that is under the GSA. It's managed by GSA. If you're talking about contracts itself, each clause should be the beginning of the next clause. Okay, it will say end underneath it when it's complete, if it's in full display for you. If it is not, it will say reference. But the clauses, they begin with a number, and that's how they're put into the contracts. So it shouldn't be hard to see when that clause ends, because it says at the end of it, end of clause or end of provision. But those are automatically generated. So in everybody's contracts across the government. So they're pretty much the same.
Awesome. All right, now last 2, we respect everybody's time, and we are approaching 3 o'clock. So last 2 questions for the day. Do we have templates for RFPs, or RFIs, or RFQs, Dr. Williams?
RFPs, RFIs are no, but your industry does. And if you look up your industry and how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, you will find a business industry specific software that you will need to purchase, on your own, that helps you respond to solicitations. We don't have templates that do that.
Awesome. And last question for the day. Are there any free references for downloading examples of templates for replying to FAR proposals? I'm a software engineer, but have limited contracting experience to reply to RFPs.
Okay, there's software out there for you as well. So any business industry that you're in, if you do a Google search, there are free templates out there There's also software specific to you that you can, purchase or use their free templates to develop a proposal, um, that you can put on your desktop and copy and paste those contents out of to respond to us, something that we put out or any other federal agency puts out. But each agency has their own contracting uh, uh, system that they use. So the format may be a little bit different. So we don't have just one, okay? RFIs look different than RFPs, and RFPs look different than source of SOX, and so forth and so forth.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Williams. And I wanted to thank everybody who was in attendance today. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And please join us for our future trainings. Go to our social media sites. You can be able to review some of our old trainings there. And you will also be able to review this training as well on our YouTube site. So thank you for everything. Thank you for attending. And we look forward to seeing you all later. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for your time as well. Hope everybody have a nice day. Thank you. Please. Don't move, Wendy. Let me end it.